Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant and intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now a full-time NIH grant mentor. And I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding. And I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee. Goodness knows I need one today. And we'll get started. So if you're attending live, just a reminder that you're in listen only mode. You can type your questions at any time. If you look on your toolbar, you'll see there's a Q&A box. You can go ahead and start typing questions in now. I'll be taking questions throughout the half hour. And if you have a comment to make just in general or want to add to some discussion that we're having, feel free to put that in the chat box. And if you are watching this as a recording, this is just a disclaimer that things change very quickly at NIH. Today is October 4th, 2023. So everything I say today is true to the best of my knowledge as of today, but do always check the NIH website and your check with your program officer just to make sure that policies have not changed. What you should be viewing in the library now, given that it's October 4th, I would imagine that many of you have just submitted. I'm over the hump of my R01 grant edits and feeling the fatigue, that's for sure. But some of you are probably still working on your resubmissions or your K submissions. You may be at the tail end of your K. I know I'm working on K applications all this week. So if you're working on a K application, you'll want to look at Master the K series. In particular, look at the last chapter. I think it's chapter 8, where I have mistakes commonly made on K applications. So that's a nice kind of like a systems check after you've put together the application. If you are working on a resubmission, I would encourage you to watch Master Resubmissions, which will help with a lot of decision making and also just how to write and format the one-page introduction to the revised application. So any NIH updates, I would say that we are in the new federal year. So we are now technically in FY24, which begins on October 1st in theory. And as with all other years, there is no funding bill for Health and Human Services. What that means for you as an applicant is that if you are getting your scores back now or in the upcoming months, there may be a delay in notice of award, because when there isn't a funding bill, NIH tends to operate at 80% of the previous year's budget, kind of as a way of hedging their bet, just in case they wind up with a big budget cut. So that means that, if it takes until maybe early February to get a funding bill before they actually have a firm budget number, and each institute knows their exact budget number for FY24, they may hold on some of those applications that are kind of right at the cutoff point, and your notice of award may be held up. Conversely, as you get toward August, sometimes there's money left over in the budget. So applications that were in the gray zone, where you got the information about your score, maybe the previous winter, all of a sudden they're picked up for funding. So it's a little bit of a weird, delays toward the end of the calendar year, when we're in like November, December, January. And sometimes when you get toward the end of the summer, as the federal budget year is winding down and institutes are trying to spend down what money they might have left, all of a sudden you might get picked up for funding out of the blue. So just to be aware that that's a thing that happens. Okay, so I see that people are putting questions in, which is great. Before I take the questions, I do have a tutorial planned for today, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. So I'm going to share my screen right now. You should be seeing a table that I created called comparison of some NIH institutional training grants, and it looks a little small. So I think I'm going to just expand that. Hopefully that you can see that a little bit better. So the reason that I am including this here is that I just, a colleague and I in my company, just created this table as part of my update to master the T32. So I just updated that course in, I think it was July and August. And I think I recorded it at the tail end of August. And my team has spent September cutting up the videos and uploading it into the learning management system. And we're having a systems check right now. And the Massachusetts Medical Society is in the process of approving it. So I'm hoping that it will be released to you guys at the end of October. So keep an eye out for an updated Master the T32 coming to you at the end of October. And there'll be a couple of more updates at the end of the year. So one of the reasons that I created this table is I often have clients who say, should I apply for a T32 or an R25? Should I apply for a T32 or a T35? Should I do an R25 or a K12? And so there's some decision-making process around why you might apply for one or the other and what the differences are. So I kind of want to quickly go through this because there's now 4 questions in the question box, and I want to make sure I have time to answer all of those. And I got one emailed earlier too. And if you want this table, it's going to be in the supplemental materials of the Master the T32 course. Or if you really want it before the end of October, just email me at meg@bouviergrant.com and we'll send you the PDF for this ahead of time. So most of you are really familiar with the T32. The difference between the T32 and, an F series or a K series or an R series is that the researcher is not the one who applies for the grant on a T32. And an organization, an institution like a university or an academic medical center applies for the T32, and that grant has training slots in it. And then it's at their discretion to fill those slots with people who they feel are appropriate for those training slots. The advantage of doing this, of course, is that if you have a T32 and those training slots are sitting there and the money is sitting there, you can attract the best trainees because, they know that once they come, they don't have to worry about how they're going to fund their research, either as a postdoc or an MSTP or whatever it might be. So that's the beauty of the T32. So it is meant to be full-time training. That's one of the major features of it. There are also other T mechanisms, but the overwhelming majority of the T series NOFOs at NIH are T32s. And I think the bulk of those are funded out of the parent announcement, although there are a handful of institutes that sponsor their own topic-specific ones, notably NIGMS, who has always had a robust T32 portfolio and beautiful training materials on their website in case that's of interest to you. So it provides individual research training. So trainees can apply for their own support at the end of their time on the T32, and that might be at the F, K, or R series. F is pre or postdoc, K is like early career, and R is the independent investigator. It could be any of these levels, and it's really meant to cover stipend, tuition, fees, and training-related experiences and health insurance. So you're probably aware all of these that I've listed here, they are a 25-page program plan. That's actually not the hard part about these. The hard part about them are the training tables. There are 8 of them, and you probably don't have to fill out all of them. It depends on your particular set of circumstances, whether it's a new application or a competing renewal of an existing program, and depending on whether it's the level of the trainees, et cetera. You won't have to fill out every single one for sure, but the tables are a bear to fill out. They're really, really challenging. So if you're trying to decide between the T32 and the T34, the big difference is that this is undergraduate only. The big difference between the T35 is that it is short term. It's not meant to be, like some very long program. So the NOFO typically specifies the weeks and hours that are, it might be like, just the summer, or it might be certain hours throughout the years, person months. The R25 is a research education program. I often have clients who decide that their T32 is going to be small enough that it's not worth the effort to put together all those training tables, and they decide instead to start at least with an R25, that might be the easier thing to do. It's a much easier application to fill out, even though the program plan is still 25 pages, but you don't have all those tables. That's the big thing. So you want to consider an R25 over a T32 if you only have a few slots. It may not be worth writing it. And the thing about the R25 is that it could be, like it's some sort of discrete training. It might involve courses or like a summer program or something like that. So there's some decision between the T35 and the R25 also. Again, this one doesn't require all those tables. Then there's something called the R38, which is stimulating access to research in residency, and the K12. These two are meant for clinicians. So the R38 is 80% effort over 12 months as opposed to the K12, which is 75% effort. So the R38 supports short-term courses or workshops to provide mentored research opportunities and facilitates transition to the K38. Typically, these are people who are newly trained clinicians or in their residency. And I'm just going to scroll down without making you feel dizzy, I hope. And then there's something called a KL2, which is like the K12, but it's embedded in a bigger grant, like a CTSA, the Clinical and Translational Science Awards, or, like a U54 or something like that. So that gives you a quick and dirty overview of some of these. I think that a lot of times people come in and they just have T32, like they just are single-minded about it. And then when I begin to ask them questions about the number of slots and whether it might be part-time or, is it clinicians, then the decision-making might take them in a different direction. And as always, have a conversation with the program officer to see what they think might be the best mechanism for you. So just to reiterate, this is a supplemental material in my upcoming updated Master the T32 course, which should be released at the end of this month. You can download it in the LMS at the end of October, or if you're just desperate to have this table for some reason, feel free to email me at meg@bouviergrant.com and we'll send you the PDF for that. Okay, and without further ado, I'm going to start taking questions, and feel free to keep typing questions here. I'm working on a K08 application that requires an advisory committee. I can't find information on whether letters or statement from advisory committee members are required and where they should be included. Do you have any insight here? Yeah, there's actually a table. I'm going to see if I can really quickly find it. There's a table in my Master the K course that will tell you. Hold on one sec. It'll tell you from whom you need letters of recommendation or letters of support, because it's all different for the mechanism, for the different mechanisms. So let me just quickly find that table, because I always struggle to remember this as well. Okay. I'm just going to share my screen. There it is. Okay. All right. You should be seeing this here. So you're at the K08. So in terms of who should be providing a reference letter, there should be a letter from your mentor. You know this though, right? That there's a letter from your mentor and a reference letters as well. And I believe on the KO8 it's 3 to 5 reference letters that have to come from people who are not associated with the project. Um, Advisory committee members, typically your mentors provide a biosketch. So a mentor or a co-mentor would provide a biosketch. And I can't remember if the other advisory committee members also send a biosketch or just do a letter of support. I'd have to look that one up. But they don't have to do a letter like the mentors and co-mentors do. So you have mentor and co-mentor letters that should sum to 6 pages. So anyhow, I would take a look at, because I have a lot of tables in here, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head what the answer to that is. So my apologies for that. Check with your pre-award support office and check with Chapter 7 of Master the K series, because off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. What are the most common pitfalls of an R21 application and how to avoid them? So first off, this person said R21 proposal, and I'm just going to say, this has just been a pet peeve of mine this cycle. I don't know why. I think it's an indication of fatigue, but there is no such thing as a grant proposal at NIH. So the words proposal and application are not synonyms at NIH. You apply for it's a grant application or a contract proposal. So there is no such thing as a grant proposal. It's a grant application. So anyhow, the most common pitfalls of an R21, first off, not having enough preliminary data. I know that this sounds counterintuitive, but unless the NOFO actually says that you shouldn't have preliminary data on it, you absolutely have to have some preliminary data on the R21. Even a publication. I know it seems really crazy given the goal of the mechanism, but that's a fact. The other thing is that, like with any 6-page format, somehow being able to shoehorn in all the information you're supposed to get in there is also a really huge problem in writing any 6-page format, particularly the R21, because it's not, like you might be writing a 5 or 6 page or 7-page research strategy, for example, for a K, but there's a little bit of grace given because the person is in the mentored stage of their career, and that's just not true on an R21. So reviewers expect a certain level of sophistication. So trying to shoehorn everything in there is really problematic. I would say that if you are writing a human subjects project of any kind, sometimes you can condense information that is detailed in the human subjects form, and then you can send reviewers to the human subjects form for details on that particular section, and that's one way to do it. What else for the R21? I would say another thing that a lot of people forget to do is talk about the follow-up R01, because the R21, almost without exception, is meant to be a pathway to an R01. It's really meant to beef up your preliminary data so that you can write a competitive R01. So you have to make clear what the R01 is going to be, what that future R01 is going to be. I would definitely say something about that as well. So yeah, off the top of my head, those would be probably the biggest mistakes I see people make on an R21. Does the Kirschstein stipends update in February every year? That's a good question. I don't work on budgets, so I don't know, but I would imagine I don't think they're tied to budget. Actually, is this question coming in because I talked about the fact that there isn't a funding bill? Because it's not tied to that. I would imagine that they don't update the stipends every year, but I would ask your pre-award support office about that. Okay, I plan to submit an NCI RO3 general opening, no specific topic. For this one, should I really contact the PO to see whether my topic is a good fit to the general NCI RO3 call? I want to hear how important it is to meet with the PO regularly. I mean, if you have time, I would never pass up an opportunity to be in contact with the NCI with any program officer, simply because it's important for them to know who you are. Like throughout the course of your career, it's just a really good idea for them to be able to put a face to a name. But having said that, like if you want to just put in the RO3 and, you can always put in an application without talking to a program officer. The RO3 budget is small. It's a much smaller mechanism. It's 2 years. The budgets vary. I don't know what the general call for the RO3 is at NCI, but it's usually around 200,000 directs over 2 years. So this is a pretty small. It's like a large foundation grant essentially. So like if you don't have time or you're having trouble contacting the program officer, just go ahead and write it and put it in. But if you have time, what have you got to lose? It's not a deal breaker is what I'm saying if you don't have time to do it. Okay, and so I'm seeing here somebody asking me to send the chart that I just showed earlier. If you want that chart sent, your best bet is to actually email me and not put it in the Q&A. So Julie, if you could just drop an email to meg@bouviergrant.com, somebody from the company will send you the comparison chart. And she's saying, I never heard of a T34 before. This is the thing, is that there's a whole world out there of training mechanisms outside of the T32 that it would be useful for people to have. Okay, so my question on a KO8, whether advisory committee members or collaborators need to provide biosketches, as the investigator I'm working with was under the impression we need to provide biosketches for these individuals. However, based on the information in the announcement, I believe biosketches are not required. Okay, so here's the thing about that. And I see that you've put the instructions here. And in fact, the instructions make it clear that they don't need to send them. But there's nothing that says that you can't send them even though they're not required. So if you have a mentor or a committee member who feels strongly that they should be putting in, or that the entire advisory committee should be putting in biosketches, I would just go ahead and do it. You're never going to be penalized for sending too many biosketches when in fact they weren't required for some advisory committee member. So if your advisor or mentor has some experience in which they feel like that has worked for them in the past, it's a little extra work on your part to read them and make sure they're okay. But I would just go ahead and do it, even though the instructions make it clear. The ones that you're posting here make it clear that they don't need to. So that's my advice on that. You're not going to get your wrist slapped for sending too many biosketches. That's never going to happen. Is it good or bad to remove some co-investigator in a resubmission? Does this change have to be explained? That's a great question. That happens all the time, where people are added or removed, co-investigators are added or removed to a resubmission. And I would explain it, particularly if it is whether it's in response to a critique or not. So reasons that you might remove an investigator is that your reviewers might say there's duplication of expertise on your team, and we see that as bloating the budget. Why do you need Dr. So-and-so on this team? And then you could say in the introduction to the revised application, we've removed that person. So that's no longer an issue. Reasons to add a person is that your reviewers on the A0 said, you are missing this key expertise. You should have, representation from the clinical community, even though this is a basic science project, whatever. And then you would say, we've added a consultant at 5% effort, and that person is an MD who works routinely in the type of clinic that this project would eventually, the findings would be translated to. So that would be an example of adding. And whether you add or remove, I would always say something in the introduction to the revised application. Unless there's a reason that you're trying, like, I don't know why you wouldn't explain it. It usually doesn't take up a lot of space. You can usually do it in 2 lines. But hopefully there isn't a reason why that you don't want them to know to know about. But maybe the person has moved to another institution and you removed them, then and replaced them with somebody else. You could even just say that then. So unless you have a reason why you wouldn't explain that, I would go ahead and explain it. So, all right. And I did get one question that came in that that was emailed to me that I haven't gotten to in past weeks. Does the NIH support teams with international collaborators? And this is actually going to be a tip on an upcoming newsletter. So NIH is funded out of taxpayer dollars, and as such, they like to keep the funding in the country, and that means not just supporting the researchers, but supporting vendors and if you're having a conference, having caterers in the country and venues in the country and buying your reagents in the country. They try, they actually are questioned about this stuff in appropriations testimony. I know this because I used to do these testimonies. I used to write them, and then we would present them to Senate subcommittees. So they're actually asked about this stuff. That doesn't mean that you can't have a foreign collaborator. You just have to have a really good reason for it. So some of the reasons why you might have a foreign collaborator is, for example, if you're applying to Fogarty, which is, a center that specializes in international projects, or it might be something that's germane to your project. So, for example, you might be submitting a project to NIAID on an infectious disease in the Caribbean or in Africa, and then it's obviously germane to the project that some of the project would be conducted out of the country. Another reason is that you might be collaborating with somebody who has unique expertise that can be found within the U.S. So you would have to make a good case for that to indicate that this is something that's truly unique to this person. And then the final reason would be if you're really trying to expand a database in some very dramatic ways. For example, you often see these like huge international consortia where they're trying to gather data on genes involved in Alzheimer's disease, and they're looking across different continents and creating large databases, in which case it's totally kosher to do something like that. But you have to have a reason to do it. It's not something that NIH is just going to be like, oh yeah, sure, you want to collaborate with this person in another country. And actually there was the last blog post from Mike Lauer had something about budgets with international collaborators. So I haven't had a chance to read that yet, but maybe we'll do a blog post on that one as well. And one final question: can I apply for an R21 before I apply for a K99 R00? I believe you can. I don't think you'd be particularly competitive on it. Double check with your program officer, either for the R21 or the K99. So K99, for those who don't know, that's a postdoc phase. It's like the earliest K series application that one might be eligible for. So I would imagine you're asking about applying for an R21 as a postdoc. So technically, I think you're allowed to do that, but I can't imagine that would be an especially successful strategy. It's hard for me to imagine a postdoc being successful on an R21. But again, double check that with your program officer. That is it for today. We are out of time, and in 2 weeks, we'll be hosting David Whitmer again, who's going to be talking about resubmission strategies. Let's see, would you please be emailing the recording like how we were emailed the invite for this session? So just so people know, the recordings of these sessions will, within a week, they will be in the learning management system. So if you go into the library of courses as a member, you'll have access to a recording of this course within a week. And within 2 weeks, it's available to the public on our YouTube channel. You can just go on YouTube and search Bouvier Grant Group. We're the only ones that come up. And again, if people want that table, the comparison of institutional training grants table, just email meg@bouviergrant.com. Or if you have any questions at all, email me, meg@bouviergrant.com. So anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. A shout out to the pre-award support people. You guys are superheroes. You're making my life a lot easier. You guys just are the best. And I wish everybody the best of luck. And for those who have submitted, take time to celebrate and rest. And for those who haven't, you got this. You're coming into the home stretch. So take care, everybody, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.